The Eastern Front of World War II, known as the Great Patriotic War in Russia, was the largest and most brutal theater of the war. It began on June 22, 1941, when Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, a massive invasion of the Soviet Union. This war would shape the fate of Europe and determine the outcome of World War II. Over 4 years, millions of soldiers and civilians perished in a conflict defined by unimaginable brutality, ideological struggle, and total war. In this documentary, we will explore the causes, key battles, and ultimate consequences of the war between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Background: why did Hitler invade the Soviet Union? Adolf Hitler's decision to invade the Soviet Union was driven by several key factors. First, he saw the Soviet Union as the ideological enemy of Nazi Germany. Hitler viewed communism as a Jewish conspiracy, and believed that Germany needed to destroy the Soviet Union to ensure the survival of the Aryan race. Second, Hitler desired Lebensraum, or living space, for the German people. He envisioned a vast empire in the east, where Slavic peoples would be enslaved and German settlers would rule over the land. Finally, despite the Nazi-Soviet Pact of 1939, which temporarily aligned Germany and the Soviet Union, Hitler always intended to break the agreement. The swift victories over France and the Low Countries in 1940 emboldened Hitler, making him believe that the Soviet Union could be defeated in a quick campaign. Operation Barbarossa, the initial blitzkrieg. On June 22, 1941, over 3 million German troops, supported by more than 600,000 Axis soldiers, crossed the Soviet border. This was the largest invasion force in history. The German army advanced in 3 major directions: Army Group North toward Leningrad, Army Group Center toward Moscow, and Army Group South toward Ukraine and the Caucasus. The Soviets were caught off guard. Within weeks, German forces had advanced hundreds of miles, capturing vast territories. The Luftwaffe dominated the skies, and thousands of Soviet aircraft were destroyed on the ground. Entire Soviet divisions were encircled and destroyed, and millions of Red Army soldiers were captured. The Germans believed they were on the verge of victory. The Battle of Moscow, the Soviet counterattack. By October 1941, German forces had reached the outskirts of Moscow. Hitler believed capturing the Soviet capital would end the war. However, the Soviet Union launched a determined defense. The Red Army, reinforced by troops from Siberia, launched a counteroffensive in December 1941. Soviet forces, aided by the harsh winter and fresh reinforcements, pushed the Germans back. It was a major setback for Hitler, who had believed the war would be won before winter. The Siege of Leningrad, a city under siege. One of the most horrifying chapters of the Eastern Front was the Siege of Leningrad, which lasted from September 1941 to January 1944. A total of 872 days. The German forces surrounded the city, cutting off food and supplies. Over 1 million civilians died, mostly from starvation. Despite immense suffering, the city never surrendered. The resilience of the people of Leningrad became a symbol of Soviet determination. The Battle of Stalingrad, the turning point. In the summer of 1942, Hitler launched an offensive toward the oil-rich Caucasus and the city of Stalingrad. The battle for Stalingrad became the bloodiest battle in history, with over 2 million casualties. The Soviet forces, under General Zhukov, launched Operation Uranus in November 1942, encircling the German 6th Army. Cut off from supplies and surrounded, the Germans surrendered in February 1943. The defeat at Stalingrad marked a turning point. Germany was now on the defensive. The Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle. In July 1943, Germany launched Operation Citadel, an attempt to regain the initiative. The Soviets, however, had prepared massive defensive positions. The Battle of Kursk became the largest tank battle in history. The German forces were repelled, and from this point onward, the Red Army began a relentless advance westward. Operation Bagration, the Soviet offensive. By 1944, the Soviet Union had rebuilt its military strength. In June 1944, Operation Bagration was launched, annihilating German Army Group Center and liberating much of Eastern Europe. The Red Army pushed into Poland, and by early 1945, they were at the doorstep of Germany. The fall of Berlin, the end of the Eastern Front. In April 1945, the Red Army launched the final assault on Berlin. The city was encircled, and after brutal street fighting, the Germans surrendered on May 2, 1945. Hitler had committed suicide in his bunker days earlier. The war in Europe ended with Germany's unconditional surrender on May 8, 1945. The cost of the Eastern Front. The Eastern Front was the most destructive theater of World War II. Over 30 million people perished, including millions of civilians. The war devastated the Soviet Union, but it also solidified its position as a superpower. Nazi Germany was utterly destroyed, and the division of Europe between East and West set the stage for the Cold War. Conclusion: the war between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union was one of history's deadliest conflicts. It was a war of ideology, survival, and total destruction. The sacrifices made on the Eastern Front changed the course of history, shaping the modern world as we know it. Understanding this brutal conflict helps us appreciate the cost of war and the resilience of those who endured it. Thank you for watching this in-depth documentary on Eastern Front. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more war historical documentaries.